None of these policy changes targets women qua women. They merely remove the unjust incentives and penalties that hinder women from pursuing traditional family life. Hi, and welcome to or back to my channel where I offer my thoughts and opinions about whatever catches my attention. I'm Kit, and today, per request, we're looking at an article by Inez Stepman, Senior Policy Analyst of the Independent Women's Forum, The Myth of the Independent Girlboss. And for anyone wondering what the Independent Women's Forum is, it's a conservative, nonprofit organization focused on economic policy issues of concern to women. Stepman's article was a very interesting journey, I must say, and she is very slippery. But we'll get there in due time. First, does anyone know what a girl boss is? I thought it was a woman somewhere high up on the career ladder, but for the past few years, it seems to mean any woman engaged in paid employment. But regardless, Stepman's point is that the independent girl boss isn't that independent, and yeah, no one, not even billionaires, is completely independent. We all rely on one another to some degree, and the sooner we realize that, the better for society. Individualism has truly been a curse on humanity. Anyway, Stepman also refers to The Dignity of Dependence, a Feminist Manifesto, Catholic Ideas for a Secular World by Leah Labresco-Sargent, and should I read it? The first line of the description is, The Dignity of Dependence argues that women's equal rights depend on advocating for women as women, and I am so curious. I always like to know what my fellow feminists are getting up to. Anyway, back to the article at hand. Stepman has issues with this mythical independent girl boss, but instead of just bringing complaints to the party, she has proposals, which I appreciate. Let's see what she recommends for society to rid itself of that troublesome girl boss. No more illegal labor or mass immigration undercutting American workers. This will reset the price of nannies and burrito taxis to their free market value. Stepman alleges that undocumented immigrants make up most nannies in the big cities, and that DoorDash rents verified accounts to them. I do agree that immigrants should be provided a simple, easy path to citizenship. That way, we can't get away with paying them less than they're worth, and if we try, they can go to the labor board without fear of deportation. Next suggestion. No more preferences for women in hiring and promotion, and no more risk of damaging lawsuits to employers who choose married male employees whose salaries support their wives' choices to stay home. I don't know if Stepman doesn't think women aren't qualified to do anything but homemake, and she should know better as a career woman herself, but her language here is very interesting. She doesn't advocate for meritocracy. She just thinks employers should be able to hire as many married men with stay-at-home wives as they want. That is oddly specific and also discriminatory. There are single men and married women who are qualified. And what about the married female employees whose salaries support their husband's choices to stay home? Or is that not allowed for men? But let's remember this. Stepman would like to make it easier for companies to hire married men. Next, no more lawsuit paydays for complaining to HR about subjective jokes in the workplace. I've noticed that folks like Stepman like to do this. They relegate sexual harassment to subjective jokes to make it sound less serious, less damaging. Not so fun fact, sexism actually scars the brain. I have no doubt frivolous lawsuits happen, and we should let them play out, remembering that we are neither plaintiff nor defendant, nor judge nor jury. But let's remember this as well. If you have a hostile work environment, Stepman thinks you should just deal. Or quit. Next, no more federal loans and subsidies for universities and female-dominated majors and degrees that don't pay for themselves. If gender studies degrees are economically self-supporting, private banks will loan students the tuition money without need for the taxpayer's intervention. Women and men earn more when they have a college degree. It is just simple fact. Stepman doesn't ask why women would have more student loan debt, and for some reason, doesn't seem to think that the gender pay gap could play a role. And if you take longer to pay off your loan, you accrue more interest, which makes it take even longer. But let's note, she wants to make it more expensive for women to attend college, even though an educated populace benefits society. We used to understand that. Anyway, last, no more federal funding of the female-dominated NGO complex. This one truly baffles me. What does she have against NGOs? Is it just that mostly women work on them? This is what she says about it, quote, volunteering and philanthropy, on the other hand, once the province of Gilded Age heiresses and women with grown-up children have been professionalized through correspondingly multiplying female-staffed NGOs. In short, the feminine impulse toward empathy that used to be predominantly applied to solve problems in one's community has been transformed into permanent activism as a career. Instead of the daughters of the American Revolution raising town statues, we have women whose career advancement depends on tearing them down. End quote. Activism is important. I don't understand the issue, unless it really is that it's female-dominated. But anyway, let's recap. She wants to make it more expensive to hire a nanny and to order takeout, which, I'm in agreement with. Human labor should never be cheap. But weirdly, it feels as though she wants this just to punish women who dare step out of their prescribed role as wife and mother, instead of concern for immigrants, though she is definitely trying to play it off as the latter. And doing a, in my opinion, shitty job. She also wants to prioritize hiring married men with stay-at-home wives, make it, illegal to sue for sexual harassment? No more federal loans for universities or female-dominated majors, and no more federal funding for the NGO complex. And despite the focus on female, she concludes her article with this, quote, "None of these policy changes targets women qua women. They merely remove the unjust incentives and penalties that hinder women from pursuing traditional family life," end quote. Stepman's repeated use of the word female begs to differ, but let's cut through the bullshit. She wants to make it more difficult for women to get an education, to be hired, and have a non-hostile work environment, which would benefit more people than just the woman in question, but anyway. This is about targeting women because they're women. Stepman doesn't think women should be out at work, she thinks they should be at home. Work just hinders them from making that choice. But how is it a choice when it's your only option? I also find it telling that she takes issue with federal student loans for women and federal funding for the female-dominated NGO complex. Does she share those same concerns when the federal government spends billions to bail out male-dominated industries such as banks, auto companies, or airlines? Anyway, that's my thoughts on her article. Now I would like to read The Problem with Today's Anti-Feminist by Ivana Greco. Quote, "There's a popular story circulating among people on the right at the moment. It goes something like this. America in 2026 is failing families. Young people are getting married less often than in past generations. They're having fewer children. There's a growing divide between the sexes, especially among Gen Z. Recent polling showed 53% of Gen Z women identify as Democrats versus 35% of men from the same cohort. Political polarization is so bad that it's making it hard for young people to date. Even those who do get married and have kids are struggling to afford housing, to take care of elderly parents, even to buy gas and groceries. The United States is in the middle of a loneliness epidemic, with most Americans, including a staggering number of young people, reporting feeling isolated. We don't seem to value the work of the home much anymore, even as the need for Americans to do the unpaid labor of taking care of families, the elderly, and communities grows ever more urgent. This story resonates because it is deeply true. Every ordinary American feels it. What we are missing is a coherent explanation of why this is happening. What is causing this American malaise? Some have found the villain. It's the women, specifically the working women. Anti-feminism has been around as long as feminism. The two have formed a sort of yin and yang during the decades-long battle over the proper role and rights of women. In its 2026 form, anti-feminism can be described as a spectrum. On one end are the extremists who want to enact lunatic measures like repealing the 19th Amendment. Further toward the center, anti-feminism has as its target the girl boss, or the high-achieving, career-focused woman who neglects hearth and home, family and community for the C-suite or boardroom. This latter view has found a wide footing in more mainstream circles. Earlier this month, Inez Stepman, a senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum, penned an article on The Myth of the Independent Girlboss, arguing that the girl boss model is incentivized to the exclusion of more traditional choices, such as relying on a husband's single income, which are punished by our tax code, our anti-discrimination laws, our immigration policy, and our culture's ethos. While recognizing the millions of women who create real value in the economy and deserve their paychecks, Stepman bemoans the wild proliferation of email jobs and administrative compliance positions, jobs disproportionately filled by the fairer sex. In March, conservative podcaster Katie Miller claimed that feminism was used to get women into the workforce to break the foundation of the American family. Motherhood is the true biological destiny for women. In January, the author Carrie Grass argued in a new book that feminism, in all its iterations, simply can't be squared with Christian morality. And back in October, the writer Helen Andrews argued that the explosion of women in the workforce is a result of a rigged system. It is an artificial result of social engineering, and if we take our thumb off the scale, it will collapse within a generation. According to Andrews, businesses, academia, and the like are suffering because female modes of interaction are not well suited to accomplishing the goals of many major institutions. These anti-feminist arguments are not carbon copies of each other, but the mainstream forums do have a coherent through line. American society is being harmed by many of her working women, especially those in elite HR and academic jobs. One terminological note: let's distinguish anti-feminists who would affirmatively like to see far fewer women in the workforce from those who critique various versions of modern feminism. Sometimes they overlap, but often they don't. There is a consistent argument here. America will be better off without her girl bosses. Is it a good one? Opponents sometimes criticize anti-feminists as hypocrites. Miller, Stepman, Grass, and Andrews all have high-profile jobs boosted in part by their public opposition to feminism and feminization. I'm not sympathetic to that criticism. It's fine to advocate for those in a lifestyle you don't personally adopt. The real issue with the anti-feminists is that they often make very little effort to reckon with the true cost of what they're advocating. The most important of these is poverty. Raising a family in America right now is very expensive. Most mothers work because that's what it takes to balance a family budget. Not long ago, I talked to a mom who stays home with a bunch of kids, and her husband doesn't make a lot of money. She sometimes has to decide whether their limited income should go to the grocery bill or for gas to see grandma. This mom doesn't regret the choices her family made, but she'd be the first to admit that it's extremely hard. Even among the upper middle class, it costs a lot to raise kids these days. Why are we criticizing moms who go out to earn a paycheck to lighten that load? Poverty is not the only wolf hunting the traditional family. Insufficient social safety nets are another. A very well-off family can have mom at home without worrying too much about something happening to dad. Presumably they've gone to the expense and trouble of making sure they're covered by good life insurance and disability insurance, with the added plus that mom likely has had enough education and work experience to re-enter the workforce if needed. Families in the middle or lower rungs of our class ladder, however, don't always have all those backup plans. If dad is an independent long-haul trucker, maybe he doesn't have decent health insurance or access to good long-term disability insurance in case of disaster. Should dad get cancer and be out of work during treatment, and mom isn't working and has little kids at home, it may be really hard for the family to adapt to this crisis. Preparing for retirement, old age, illness, these and more can be very difficult in families where only one spouse works. Two spouses in the workforce not only means more money, it also means more security, and American families that have a breadwinner homemaker division of labor usually know they're choosing a risky option, even if they think it's worth it. To give the anti-feminists their due, I assume in good faith that most of them want to protect women in traditional families. Scott Yenner, the chair of the American Citizenship Initiative at the Heritage Foundation, has advocated for allowing businesses to support traditional family life by hiring only male heads of households or by paying a family wage. But this doesn't take into account the broader economic forces that are shaping women and men's work in the United States. Anti-feminists often focus on elite jobs, the increasing number of female lawyers, for example, or women in prestigious academia. But whatever the impact of more women accessing the ivory tower or sitting on the Supreme Court, which for the record I think is good, this trend is not causing the average working class man to lose his job. Nor does it explain why so many blue-collar men struggle to find work that pays well. Instead, men are coming out the losers as the U.S. economy shifts away from manufacturing and construction jobs, which are traditionally held by men, into healthcare jobs, which are traditionally held by women. Let's not forget that even when America's workforce was overwhelmingly male, we still had the Great Depression. Male jobs can still be subject to macroeconomic factors regardless of what the ladies are doing. Put another way, even if we eliminated all the gender studies departments in colleges across America tomorrow, this is no help to a middle-aged man currently working at a brass plant in Ohio that recently announced it was closing and sending its jobs to Asia. Fewer women in the C-suite will not reverse globalization, automation, and the other broad economic forces creating headwinds for male employment. It's not possible to help families that want to have a breadwinner homemaker division of labor without squarely grappling with the reality of the true cause of downward pressure on male wages. The problem is not the girl bosses. It's mostly China and robots. Indeed, a major gripe I have with anti-feminists is that they make it harder to achieve policy wins for moms and dads at home. In my own work advocating for homemakers, I can attest that it is extremely difficult to convince centrist and left-of-center lawmakers to support measures supporting stay-at-home parents when they fear these policies are actually a Trojan horse for trying to kick women back to the kitchen. There are many practical measures we could take to help these parents, including encouraging corporations to hire at-home parents who want to return to work, considering how to reform our Social Security system to better protect homemakers, or how to reform our 401k system to better protect traditional families. All these and more become fraught, though, when the question shifts away from helping families make the choices that work for them and instead becomes, are we trying to protect stay-at-home moms, or are we trying to force girl bosses into roles that they don't want? Even reasonable measures can fail to gain traction when they are sucked up into the broader culture war. To be sure, anti-feminists are correct that modern American society does not respect the work of the home enough. As our society grapples with declining birth rates, the increasing proportion of elderly in need of friend and family support, as well as the breakdown in community ties, it is inevitable that we will need some sort of reckoning over our inability to value work that does not appear in the GDP. However, trying to force this reckoning by attacking girl bosses is essentially a poison pill. Setting up a dichotomy in which women in paid careers are the enemy and women at home are the heroes will not help. After all, there is no bright line between the two. Many women in America move in and out of the workforce depending on family needs. A woman might take a few years off to care for babies, return to paid work when the family's youngest child is in kindergarten, and then leave paid work again once grandpa needs serious care. Similarly, many moms who have full-time care of their kids at home also work after their kids are in bed or on weekends. I recently talked to a mom who takes care for kids during the day, but waits tables at night after her husband comes home from work. This job helps pay for extras, but it also gives her something to do that isn't taking care of kids. We had this conversation, as a matter of fact, because I was sitting at a table in the restaurant where she worked and she was my waitress. She brought me my Guinness and some fancy pizza as I worked on an essay while my husband was putting my kids to bed after I'd spent the day homeschooling the big kids and taking care of the babies. After we talked about why I was in a bar at 7:30 p.m. with a computer and a stack of books, she talked about why she was there. Yes, we agreed, even though kids are great, it's nice to have other stuff in life. Can the anti-feminists truly account for women like us? Maybe we are acceptable to the anti-feminists because we do so much childcare, but let me be clear. I do less laundry, cook less elaborate dinners, and keep the house less clean because I write. In terms of being able to reliably find matching socks and being sure where the new car registration paperwork is, the family is worse off because I'm writing this after the kids are in bed. I'm doing it anyway because I want to. Family life necessarily involves trade-offs and compromises, and a wise mother understands flexibility around everyone's preferences and needs, including her own, is key to making the work of the home work. My most serious problem with the anti-feminists has to do with the one place they're having a significant impact. They're making work and relationships harder for young conservative women. Young liberal women, to be clear, are too far out of their direct sphere of influence to be seriously affected. The same is not true of young conservative ladies. In talking to other moms who have kids at conservative religious high schools and colleges, I hear the same thing over and over again. There's a lot of hostility to girl bossing, and this is carrying over to young conservative women who appear too ambitious or too career-oriented. I've heard from one mom whose teenage daughter at a small religious high school is encountering rumblings of Repeal the 19th from some of the boys she goes to school with and finds it depressing. A recent op-ed in the Hillsdale Collegian, a newspaper at the famously conservative Hillsdale College, is titled "Sexism Isn't Based or Trad." Its author, a female college student who attends the traditional Latin Mass and says she likes wearing dresses, these are markers of modern conservative young womanhood for those not acquainted with this world, says she's tired of sexism on this campus and she had never encountered anything like it before coming here. Among other problems, the author observes that, "I've even heard several women seriously argue that women are intellectually and creatively deficient compared to men." It's a snapshot of anti-feminism in the wild, I guess, having escaped the internet and entered real life. Over and over, I have heard from younger women that it's really hard to date in this environment or to understand how to situate themselves with respect to anti-feminist theories. In many ways, it can feel like anti-feminists, having benefited from the doors open to them in terms of achieving prestigious, flexible jobs and a family, are now working on closing those doors to the next generation. If I were in college today, I'd probably view many of the anti-feminists as having achieved success in both work and family life, and then trying to pull up the ladder behind them. The anti-feminist black and white thinking, women versus men, female careers are bad and homemakers are not, is deeply unhelpful in this environment because it doesn't help guide the younger generation and what they most need in order to find a partner, the ability to get along. My husband and I recently celebrated 22 years since our first date. We met when I was 18 and are now both in our early 40s. When there is marital discord in the Greco household, usually it took two to tango. There's no winning in a good marriage, no easy divide between who was right and who was wrong. There's just trying to work things out around all the many inevitable problems, big and small, that life throws at you, and trying to keep a good sense of humor about the whole thing. It's hard to help young people learn this lesson when Andrews, for example, describes cohesion and empathy as stereotypically feminine. Relationships require working hard to understand the other person's point of view and buckets of compromise to function well. It's not feminine to talk through problems with your wife or girlfriend, but too many young men are being taught the opposite. Ultimately, the problems anti-feminists identify are real, but their villain is not. Too bad for us. They're still capable of making the problem worse by scaring young people with a boogeyman, or I guess, a boogie woman, end quote. My thoughts on this? There's nothing quite like having it laid out right in front of you how concerning this effort to convince women work is bad and they should be home, to convince men that women working is why they're struggling and women should be home is. Also, a capitalist economy is never going to value housework because it can't be counted in the GDP. In conclusion, there is a lot wrong with the world, with our society, and your quarrel is not with feminists, it is not with working women. Look up. And that's it for this video. My socials and Patreon are linked below along with sources and resources. I would like to thank everyone for watching through to the end, and of course, I would like to give extra thanks to my patrons. Have a wonderful day. As my shift says, keep thinking, and I'll see you in the next one.